Welcome to Let's Take a Walk, brought to you by the Feld Group Institute. In this episode, we revisit a clip from Charlie Feld and Rob Carter, where they explore a leadership skill that doesn't get talked about nearly enough: storytelling. Not storytelling as performance, but storytelling as a way to make complex ideas understandable, relatable, and actionable. If you've ever struggled to explain technology, architecture, or change in a way that truly lands with the business, this conversation is for you.
One of the things that I saw in you was you're a great storyteller. And I'm sure it comes from being curious because you have a lot of experience and you can connect dots, right? And also, culturally developing people. But the third trait is, how do you put it together and how do you tell a story? Because we deal in a complex world. I mean, sometimes I think about the level of complexity we deal with. If one wire breaks somewhere around the globe, everything stops, right? And it is a complex topic. And if you want to try and explain architecture to people, if you want to, how do you think about putting together the stories? Because I've watched you do I could name 6 things that you've done over the years that actually changed the leadership team's thought process at FedEx without really selling them anything, just kind of including them in a story. Right? How do you take complex things and make them simple?
Well, the first thing you have to do is look for analogs that are understandable in the business. And so when you talk about the 4 horsemen of dominant design, I talked about the railroads and the development of the networks and how standards emerged and interconnectivity began to work more effectively. And, most of them hadn't really studied the concept of dominant design. And dominant design is fascinating because technology at that point in time had gone through wave after wave of proprietary design, but it was beginning to emerge. There was a dominant design that was beginning to emerge, and it wasn't what we had. It wasn't mainframes, and it wasn't, client server of, 5 different versions. It was a unique set of technologies that were becoming, like the railroads. I mean, 4 foot 8.5 inches on center on the rail. It was something that you could lock and load on. And it was really important for me to describe technological architecture, modernization, and the path we needed to be on in terms that would give them pause to think about, oh, I get that. How did the plug in the wall that we plug our electrical appliances into wind up looking like that? It didn't always look like that. There were 50, 100 different versions of that thing before the dominant design emerged, and we could all sort of plug in and go. So those analogs were super important to me. I realized that pretty early in my career. My undergraduate was in the 70s in computer science. And I came out, with reasonable technical chops for the time, but I quickly realized that the technology teams didn't speak the language of the business. And you had to begin to figure out ways, if you wanted to get the business partnership that was really necessary to deliver, technology that was going to change the game, then you absolutely had to figure out ways to explain what you were doing. And this idea of, oh, we'll take care of that, you don't need to know that, was foolishness in my mind. They had to understand what you were doing in ways that would allow them to help pull whatever program that you were trying to deliver for the business forward, because it was about the business. It wasn't about the technology. So 4 Horsemen was a great one, talking about dominant design. Tale of Two Networks was a great one to describe the digital twin. I talked about how transportation and physical networks developed over centuries to get to the point where they were. And then I started talking about how technology and digital networks were there. And it was great to be at FedEx because our story was so understandable. We had packages moving through networks, but we had a digital twin of the data of that package moving through our technological networks. And so it would spark this curiosity, not just at FedEx, but any place you told that story, because people began to understand what a digital twin was and how you could manage things in a virtual world, that would have great effect on what actually happens in the physical world. Storytelling for me was all about, interesting things in history that were analogs that you could relate to the work in front of you and why you should go aggressively down this path as a business.
What makes great leaders effective isn't just what they know, it's how clearly they help others see it. Storytelling isn't about oversimplifying complexity. It's about creating shared understanding so people can move forward together. Thanks for taking a walk with us. We'll see you next time.